The reading took place in a stiff, oak-paneled room that smelled of dust, old books, and unspoken secrets. Lydia sat at the very end of the table, clutching her worn purse on her lap, her fingers nervously twisting the fraying leather strap. She had always been the outsider in her family. The niece who never had much money, the one whispered about during holiday gatherings for not quite living up to the family name. The lawyer, a man with thinning gray hair and a steady voice, shuffled through his papers. Around the table sat Lydia's cousins and distant relatives, all dressed in polished suits and silk dresses. Their eyes gleamed with anticipation. Everyone was waiting to hear what portion of the inheritance they would receive from the late Mr. Harrington, Lydia's eccentric great-uncle. The lawyer cleared his throat. To my beloved niece, Cassandra, I leave the summer estate in Brighton. Cassandra's eyes sparkled as she smirked at Lydia. To my nephew, Charles, the collection of rare cars. Charles let out a satisfied chuckle. To Lydia, the lawyer paused, his voice calm but final. I leave this. He placed a small object on the table. A rusty, old-fashioned key. There was silence, then laughter. It came first from Cassandra, then Charles. Then the others joined in like a cruel chorus. A key? That's it. Cassandra sneered, her manicured hand waving dismissively. Looks like you'll need to pawn it for scrap metal. Charles leaned back in his chair. Maybe it opens a broom closet somewhere, Lydia. How fitting. Their laughter echoed in the room, sharp and cutting. Lydia's cheeks burned, but she didn't rise to the mockery. Instead, she picked up the key carefully, holding it in her palm. It was heavy, rough to the touch, and oddly warm, as though it had been waiting for her. The lawyer's expression softened as he glanced at her. Sometimes, Miss Lydia, things are not what they seem. Your uncle was fond of puzzles, but no one paid attention. The family filed out, celebrating their newfound wealth, while Lydia remained seated, staring at the key. Something about it whispered of mystery, of a secret waiting to be unlocked. And in that moment, though she didn't yet know how, Lydia realized her life was about to change forever. The next morning, Lydia stood at the edge of a forgotten dirt road, holding the rusty key tightly in her hand. She had followed the directions scribbled on the back of an envelope the lawyer had given her. Her cousins hadn't even cared to ask where the key led. They were too busy flaunting their new estates and cars. What she found at the end of the road made her heart sink. It wasn't a grand estate or even a decent cottage. It was a shack, weather-beaten, slanted, and nearly swallowed by wild ivy. Its windows were cracked, and the wooden door looked like it would collapse at the slightest push. From behind her, a familiar voice rang out. Well, look at the inheritance, Cassandra mocked, stepping out a shiny new car that had followed Lydia down the road. Charles leaned against the hood, grinning. Careful, Lydia, he said. The roof might fall on your head. Hope your key fits this dump. Their laughter stung, but Lydia ignored it. She walked to the door and slipped the key into the lock. To her surprise, it turned smoothly, as though it had been waiting for this moment. The door creaked open, and a musty smell filled her nose. Inside, the shack was as unimpressive as the outside. Broken furniture, dust coating every surface, and a cracked stone fireplace. A pile of old boxes leaned precariously in one corner. Congratulations, Cassandra called from outside. You inherited trash. Guess Uncle Harrington didn't think much of you after all. The door slammed shut as they drove away laughing. Lydia stood alone in the dim light, filtering through the dirty windows. But as her eyes adjusted, she noticed something strange. The floorboards beneath the fireplace looked newer, almost out of place compared to the rest of the room. She crouched down, her hand brushing against the edges of the wood. Something was hidden here. Her pulse quickened. The rusty key felt heavier in her pocket, as though it were urging her forward. Lydia whispered to herself, "This isn't just a shack. There's something more." And in that lonely, crumbling room, her curiosity sparked into determination. She had no idea yet that beneath the dust and rotting would lay the secret to a fortune beyond imagination. The night was eerily quiet as Lydia lit a small lantern she had found in one of the boxes. Its warm glow flickered across the shack's broken walls, making the shadows dance. She returned to the fireplace, kneeling in front of the oddly newer floorboards. Carefully, she tapped on them with her knuckles. The sound was different, hollow. Her heart skipped. Something was definitely underneath. Using a piece of rusted metal she pulled from a shelf, Lydia pried at the edges. The board resisted at first, but then gave way with a crack, revealing a narrow compartment beneath. Inside was a small iron lockbox. Its surface was dull and covered in dust, but the shape was unmistakable. This was no ordinary box. Lydia lifted it out carefully, coughing as the dust swirled around her. The box had no keyhole visible at first, but when she turned in the lantern light, she saw a faint engraving on the lid. "The rust will guide you." Her rusty key. Hands trembling. She slid the key into a hidden slot on the side of the box. With a faint click, it opened. Inside lay a stack of brittle documents, yellow with age. At first, Lydia thought they were worthless papers. But when she held one up to the light, her eyes widened. They were deeds. Land ownership deeds. And not just one or two, dozens of them. Each stamped with official seals, each bearing her uncle's signature. The names of properties leapt out at her. Downtown office blocks, luxury apartments, stretches of farmland now part of a booming development. Her breath caught. She remembered walking past those places in the city, never imagining she might own even a part of them. But here it was, proof. Her uncle hadn't left her a shack. He had left her the key to an empire. The realization sent shivers through her. But at the same time, fear crept in. If her cousins ever found out about this, they would stop at nothing to take it from her. Closing the box, Lydia whispered to herself, "This is why he gave me the key. He wanted me to find it, and he wanted me to be ready." For the first time in her life, she felt a surge of power. But she also knew that with this discovery came danger, and the real test had only just begun. The next morning, Lydia walked into town with a calm face, though her heart was still racing from the discovery in the shack. She needed to act as if nothing had changed, as if the rusty key had only opened disappointment. But her cousins were already circling like vultures. At the cafe in the village square, Lydia overheard two of them, Martha and Evelyn, sipping coffee and gossiping. "Poor girl," Martha sneered, stirring sugar into her cup. "All Uncle Henry left her was that rotting shack. Serve her right. She was always a charity case." Evelyn giggled. "I almost feel sorry for her." "Almost. At least she won't be bothering us about family inheritance anymore." Lydia clenched her fists under the table where she sat in the corner, her tea untouched. They thought she had been humiliated. They thought she had nothing. And for now, she had to let them believe it. But as she left the cafe, she caught the eye of her cousin Robert. Unlike the others, Robert wasn't laughing. He studied her with sharp suspicion, his lips curling into the faintest smirk. "She's hiding something." Lydia heard him mutter to Evelyn when he thought she was out of earshot. Her stomach tightened. Robert was cunning, always sniffing for advantage, always scheming. He would be the most dangerous of them all if he guessed the truth. That evening, Lydia returned to the shack and locked the iron box away beneath the floorboards again. She sat in the dim light, thinking hard. She couldn't just march into the city waving the deeds around. If the cousins caught wind of it, they would tie her up in lawsuits or worse. No, she needed allies. People who would protect her, guide her, and help her unlock the empire her uncle had secretly entrusted her with. Her father's old friend, Mr. Grayson, came to mind, a retired lawyer who had once worked with wealthy estates. He lived quietly on the edge of town, forgotten by most, but Lydia remembered the kindness in his eyes whenever he visited years ago. "Yes," she whispered, determination rising in her voice. "Mr. Grayson will know what to do." But as she prepared to leave the shack, a noise outside froze her in place. Footsteps. Someone was watching. Her lantern flickered, and for a terrifying moment, Lydia wondered if her secret had already been discovered. The night was unusually still. Even the crickets seemed to hold their song as Lydia's ears strained toward the sound of footsteps outside the shack. Her pulse quickened. She blew out the lantern, plunging the room into darkness. The only light now came from the pale moon filtering through the cracked window. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the faint crunch of gravel again. Someone was circling the shack. Lydia's mind raced. Who would be out here in the middle of the night? The townsfolk had no reason to come this way. That left only one explanation: her cousins. She crouched low and pressed her ear to the wooden floorboards. The air seemed thick with tension. A shadow passed by the window. Tall, deliberate, careful. Whoever it was, they didn't want to be seen. A floorboard creaked outside the door. Lydia held her breath, her body trembling, her heart pounding so hard she feared it would give her away. Then the door handle rattled. Slowly. Testing. No! Lydia whispered under her breath, fear gripping her spine. She braced herself against the door, holding it shut with all her strength. After a long pause, the rattling stopped. Silence stretched once more. Lydia dared to peek through a gap in the shutters. The moonlight revealed only the outline of a figure retreating down the path, cloaked in shadows. She couldn't see a face, but she could see the gait, deliberate, confident, familiar. Her cousin Robert. Lydia's suspicion hardened into certainty. He had followed her here, and he had nearly caught her with the iron box exposed. She slumped against the door after he disappeared into the night. Fear mingled with fury. Robert wouldn't stop. He was hunting for her secret. And if he uncovered the truth, he would do everything in his power to strip it from her. The shack was no longer safe. At dawn, Lydia packed the iron box into a worn leather satchel and prepared to leave. There was only one place she could go, to Mr. Grayson. If anyone could help her protect the fortune hidden in her inheritance, it would be him. But as she slung the satchel over her shoulder, she whispered to herself with new resolve. They mock me. They think I'm broken. But this key opened more than a mansion. It opened my destiny, and I will not let them steal it. She stepped out into the morning light, the rusty key cold in her hand. The town was just beginning to stir as Lydia walked down the cobblestone street, her satchel pressed close to her side. Her eyes darted left and right, half expecting Robert or one of the other cousins to leap out from the shadows. By the time she reached the polished oak door of Mr. Grayson's law office, her breath was ragged, her palms damp. She hesitated before knocking, but her resolve hardened. She had no choice. The old lawyer opened the door himself. His white hair was neatly combed, his sharp spectacles perched low on his nose. His gaze flicked from Lydia's anxious face to the satchel clutched against her chest. "Miss Lydia," he said with quiet surprise, "I was wondering when you might come." "You knew?" Lydia asked, her voice cracking with both relief and suspicion. Mr. Grayson gestured her inside. The office smelled faintly of leather and ink, lined with shelves stacked high with legal tomes. He locked the door behind them, then motioned for her to sit. "I couldn't say much in front of your relatives," he explained as he settled into his chair. "Your late uncle anticipated their greed. That is why he left you the shack and the key." Lydia leaned forward, desperate. "But why me? They all think it's worthless." Mr. Grayson gave a faint smile. "That shack was no punishment. It was a test, and you passed." Confused, Lydia unbuckled her satchel and placed the iron box on his desk. His eyes twinkled with recognition. Carefully, he lifted the lid and removed the stack of yellow documents inside. "These," he said, spreading the papers across the desk, "are deeds. Not just to land, but to half the valley. Oil fields, timber rights, and property holdings worth hundreds of millions. Your uncle kept them hidden because he knew your cousins would squander it all. But he believed you had the heart and discipline to carry the weight." Lydia's hand shook as she touched the papers. "All this time they laughed at me. They said I was cursed." "They still will," Mr. Grayson said gravely. "But now you hold power they cannot imagine, and power always attracts enemies." Her mind flashed back to Robert at the shack door, the shadow outside her window, the rattling handle. He already suspected. "What should I do?" she whispered. The lawyer folded the deeds back into the box and looked at her with piercing eyes. "Guard this secret as though your life depends on it, because it does. But when the time comes, Miss Lydia, step into the light and let them see just what that rusty key truly unlocked." A shiver ran down Lydia's spine. For the first time, she saw her inheritance not as a burden, but as a weapon, and she was ready to wield it. Robert slammed his fist on the oak dining table as the cousins gathered in the grand estate. His face was red with fury. "She's hiding something," he growled. "No one smiles over a shack unless there's more to it. That key she got, what if it unlocked something valuable?" The others muttered in agreement. Jealousy burned in their eyes. They had their jewels, their horses, their estates. But still, the thought of Lydia possessing even a crumb of hidden wealth drove them wild. "We'll confront her," Robert decided. "Tonight." But Lydia was no longer the trembling girl they mocked. When they arrived at the shack, storming inside with accusations and sneers, they did not find her sweeping floors or patching holes. They found her seated at a small wooden table, calm, dignified, and waiting for them. On the table sat the iron box, unlocked, its contents neatly displayed. "What's this?" Robert demanded, striding forward. "Your downfall," Lydia replied evenly. Gasps rippled around the room as they recognized the papers. Land deeds, mineral rights, contracts, and bonds. Proof that the shack had been a disguise, a vault for their late uncle's vast fortune. Mr. Grayson, the lawyer, stepped from the corner where he had been silently watching. His voice cut through the tension. "Your uncle left these to Lydia because he knew none of you could resist greed, and you've proven him right." The cousins' laughter died instantly. Their arrogance crumbled. They stared at Lydia with wide eyes, speechless, as she rose from her chair. "You mocked me," she said, her voice steady. "You called me cursed. But this," she gestured to the deeds, "is not just wealth, it's responsibility. And I will honor it, even if you never understand." Robert lunged forward, but Mr. Grayson's stern glare stopped him cold. "Touch one paper, and you will answer to the law. These holdings are sealed and secured. They belong to her now and only her." The cousins could only watch as Lydia gathered the papers, slid them back into the iron box, and locked it with the same rusty key they had once ridiculed. As she walked past them, lantern light glinting in her eyes, the cousins shrank back. For the first time, they saw her not as a poor girl in a ruined shack, but as a rightful heiress to a fortune greater than all their combined inheritances. Outside, the night was cool and still. Lydia paused on the porch, holding the key tightly in her palm. The shack that once symbolized humiliation now stood as a monument to her triumph. Her uncle had trusted her. She had endured mockery, suspicion, and fear, and emerged stronger. And as the moonlight bathed the valley, she whispered to herself. They laughed at the rusty key. Tomorrow, they'll bow to what it unlocked.